everybody, welcome back to Bibles on a Budget. I am CJ, and today we are taking a look at a very interesting Bible. This is actually just a New Testament. It is called the Kingdom New Testament, a contemporary translation by N.T. Wright. So if you are not familiar with N.T. Wright, N.T. Wright is a very famous and well-known New Testament scholar from England. So he actually created made a new translation, basically. This is a contemporary translation. So this is actually a translation and not a paraphrase, because he's not going off of a version and then writing his own paraphrase of the Bible. This is a translation. So this man does know, as far as I'm aware of, he does know the languages. But this version is a hardback, and this is the dust cover. So here's the dust cover. Here's the spine. It says the Kingdom New Testament, N.T. Wright, and this is published by Zondervan. And here is the back. And here's some information about it and such. So if you want to pause, you can go ahead. Let me scoot that up a little bit more for you guys there. If you want to go ahead and pause and read that. But let me give you some information on how I came into possession of the Kingdom New Testament. So I was at my local Ollie's, which is a surplus closeout store here in my local area. And I was just looking to see what Bibles they had, because they have a lot of Bibles typically. And I saw this, and I was like, oh, what is this? I don't know what this is. So I picked it up and checked it out. And so basically what this is it is a translation. As far as I'm aware of, it's a translation that leans more dynamically. So it's more like an NIV, an NLT, or a New English translation. So this is not a word for word, but something that is more, what you could say, thought for thought. So according to N.T. Wright, this is supposed to be a way for the reader to rediscover the scriptures, or read them afresh with a fresh look at them. Because sometimes we just read the Bible and we just don't really bat an eye. We just read it and that's it. So this is, I guess, meant to have you stop and read and like, oh, interesting. You know, you kind of read through it. So without further ado, let's take off the dust cover. But inside the dust cover, you do get some information. This is from the preface to the Kingdom New Testament here. And then on the other side, there's the Bible itself. You do get some information about N.T. Wright. Again, he is a world-leading Bible scholar. He is a former Bishop of Durham, which is a city in England. He is from the Church of England, and he is a senior research fellow at Wycliffe Hall and a senior editor at St. Andrews. These are, again, British institutions. For 20 years, Wright taught New Testament studies at Cambridge, McGill, and Oxford universities, and has been featured on ABC News, Dateline, the Colbert Report, I don't know who this person is, and Fresh Air. I am familiar with N.T. Wright because I listened to a podcast called Unbelievable, which is from the folks at Premier Christianity in England, and Mr. Wright has been on there before, but he has his own podcast as well with them. So anyway, here's the New Testament itself. I really like the color that they went with. Really reminds me of the coloring of the NIV Reader's Bible. So you got this kind of goldish, mustard yellow kind of color, and this like nice black. On the spine, again, same deal with what we saw in the dust cover, the Kingdom New Testament, N.T. Wright, and Harper 1, which is still a part of the same company that Zondervan comes from. And then here's the back, nothing except for some dirt. So let's get into the New Testament. So here we go. So unlike my traditional reviews, there's not going to be an Old Testament. So this is not a full Bible, folks. This is just the New Testament. He does have a full Bible, which is called the Bible for Everyone. The Kingdom New Testament is actually the American name for his work. The British name is actually the New Testament for Everyone. So over here, here's the copyright page, and then some dedications for Maggie and Julian, Rosman, Harriet, and Oliver. I can only assume that those are members of his family. All right, so here is the contents. So again, this is just the New Testament, so you're only going to have Matthew to Revelation, but you're also going to have a list of maps and the preface. And then right here, here's the list of maps. You do have maps. I believe they're interspersed throughout the text. I have read this, but I haven't really looked into like all this stuff. So we're kind of really just taking a joint look together. Even though I have read some of this, I just haven't read it extensively. So here is the preface. I have read this, so this is just telling you why he did it, what he did. So like for instance, down here, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Down here, he talks about what he's done with the translation for Christos, which is translated or transliterated into English as Christ. So he says, I have done the same with Christos, referring to another word that he's tried to translate words in, I wouldn't say unique ways, but at least less churchy ways in a sense. He is a man in the church, but anyway. So he says, I've done the same with Christos. Most translations simply say Christ, but most modern English speakers assume that word is simply a proper name, as though Jesus were Jesus's Christian name and Christ were his surname. So for this reason, he's chosen to sometimes translate it as Messiah or even King, because Christos or Christ does mean Messiah or Anointed One. So you do get some insight into his translation. Sorry about that. Just gotta calm my thing, so I'm gonna pop back up here. So this is just the preface. There you go. And then here is our first map. So this is kind of the general area. This is Galilee, Samaria, and Judea in the 1st century AD. And then what he has done with the formatting is that this is single column, so it's not double column, so it more or less reads like a normal book. But you do have section headers off to the side. So Jesus' genealogy is right here, and then the birth of Jesus here. And then also you have the name of the book at the start in this black box, and then always these giant bold chapter numbers to start the chapter. And then at the top, you kind of see what is the first verse on this page and the last verse on this page. So again, this is just the New Testament. This is also just a black letter. So again, there is no red letter in this version of the New Testament. So let's look at some translation choices here. So again, this is a different translation, maybe a little bit more dynamic, but what we have here is we have a leading New Testament scholar taking his crack at a translation. So let's look at the Beatitudes here, which starts in verse 3. So typically when you read certain word-for-word translations, it will say, blessed are the poor in spirit. Here he has blessings on the poor in spirit, blessings on the mourner, blessings on the meek. So as if Jesus is proclaiming a blessing to the people, which, you know, maybe you have problems with that, or I don't know. I just appreciate for what it is. I'm not bothered by that as well. Another interesting translation choice over here is in chapter 4. This is when Jesus is in the wilderness being tempted by the devil. When Jesus is about to say the last thing to the devil, he says, "Get out of here, you Satan." Now, you'll notice that Satan is not capitalized. The reason being is because Satanas, which is, or sorry, that's the Spanish word for Satan. Satan in Hebrew is actually the word for adversary. So when he has Jesus saying, "Get out of here, you Satan," this is Jesus basically calling Satan, "You adversary," right? So in the church, there is this idea that Satan was, before his fall, called Lucifer, and then in his current state he is called Satan, as if that was a proper name, when in fact these words actually mean things, right? So in Hebrew, the word that we have in our Old Testament, Lucifer, or Lucifer in Latin, that is a Latin word. That's not a proper name. That's actually a noun. It's translating the word, if I remember correctly, Hallel, which refers to morning star or something like that. And in Job, you have Satan approaching the throne of God and talking to God about Job. But in Hebrew, the word Satan just means adversary. So it's actually not a proper name, even though traditionally we would call the devil Satan, or we would call his pre-fallen state Lucifer. So there you go. So a little bit of background there. So again, we have Matthew here. Anytime you have something that looks like poetry, you see how it's separated. Here it's italicized. Let me get a little closer to that. So again, you have it here where it looks italicized and such. And this is his rendering of the Lord's Prayer, which is, "Our Father in heaven, may your name be honored, may your kingdom come, may your will be done as in heaven, so on earth. Give us today the bread we need, and forgive us the things we owe, as we too have forgiven what was owed to us. Do not bring us into great trial, but rescue us from evil." Alrighty. So there you go. There's not a whole lot else to say about this other than translation choices. The format is, again, very obvious. Let me see if I can find another instance, a larger instance of the more pair poetry kind of style. You could say that I could go to, for instance, Philippians 2. So here we go. Philippians 2. You notice, again, here's a larger section of the poetry. This time it's separated, but again, italicized, and it is not in blocks. It's more kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's more like how Psalms typically is in a Bible, but there you go. And then I'm just going to go back to, let me zoom out again for you guys. Everything is still pretty much the same. Except... Bum, 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 bum. Now, like I said, folks, I've read through this, but I haven't explored it too much. So here's something interesting. So remember that we typically call this book Jude, but we see that N.T. Wright has named it Judah. That's his Hebrew name. We typically call him Jude. Let me see if I'm trying to find the letter to what we call James. I want to see if he actually gave him his Hebrew name, because nope. So that's very interesting. So here we do have the book of James, and then we have the book of Judah. I would have preferred, and here's the thing. So traditionally in our Bible, the letter associated with the brother of Christ named James is called James. But there is good... I believe there's a good argument to make that his name in Hebrew originally is actually Jacob. So Judah is the brother of James, who would have been the brother of Christ. This is not James and John. This is James, the brother of Christ. Because whether you're Catholic or not, you may have a different view on these so-called, what we Protestants would call the brothers of Christ. You may call them other family members, but typically, traditionally, within Protestant churches, Judah, James, these are brothers of Christ. So, but that's very interesting. I've never seen anybody call it the letter of Judah. So this is Judah, but typically we call it Jude. And then here is the revelation of John, which I would say probably actually needs to be called the revelation of Jesus. Again, here's the example. I'll zoom in on here. Here's the example of the rendering of Christos as Messiah. So there you go. And again, here's another map. So this is Asia Minor during the time of John in these 7 churches of Asia. So you can see where these different churches are in Asia Minor. Actually, I might be saying that wrong. This might not be Asia Minor, but this is where these churches are. So they don't show where they are modern, like where they're at now. But Ephesus is in Turkey. And then here's Patmos. And then some other places you're familiar with: Laodicea, Philadelphia, and so on. There you go. So, alrighty. So, what do I think about this New Testament? Well, it's not a fancy thing, obviously. Not a very fancy thing, but it's actually really cool. I like it. I like hardback books. No thrills. It just has paper paste down because it is a hardback. So I think that's reinforcement tape right there. But this is obviously not going to be edge lined. This is also $34.99 from Zondervan themselves. I got this for about $15 at Ollie's. White page edges. It's a no thrills book, right? If you remember my review for the LSB 2-column hardback, this is basically the same thing, right? Again, this is a single column though. I can't give you information about the font. I don't know how big it is, but it is very readable. It's very comfortable. It's a very classic looking font. But yeah, who would I recommend this one for? Because I typically have recommendations for some of my Bibles that I review here. I don't know if I can recommend this to really anybody unless you are wanting to have another dynamic translation in your arsenal. Maybe if you're interested in this, definitely check it out. If you're fascinated, if you know who Tom Wright is, if you know who he is, and you want to see what he's done, I would probably actually recommend over this the Bible for Everyone, which is the full Bible, not just the New Testament, but the whole Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. So I picked this up because I was curious about it. I don't know if I can say, go out and get this, or hey, if you're a pastor, I can't say that I would recommend it to everybody. But if you're somebody who, you want multiple different types of Bibles in your study, maybe this can benefit you. So I would recommend it for that kind of person. But anyway, folks, thank you so much for watching Bibles on a Budget. And remember, folks, the truth does not have to be expensive. I'm going to center up this Bible real quick. See you guys in the next one.